I never thought I'd be the kind of person to end up writing something like this, but after everything that happened, I feel like I need to get it out before it eats me alive. My name's Ethan, I'm 29 years old, and up until last year I thought I had life figured out. Not perfect, but stable. I had a job I liked well enough, working as a graphic designer for a marketing firm downtown, an apartment that actually felt like home, and two people I trusted more than anyone in the world, my girlfriend Lena and my best friend Mark. If you asked me back then who I'd take a bullet for, I would have said both of them without hesitation. Lena and I had been together for almost 5 years. She had this mix of calm and confidence that pulled me in from the start. She was the kind of person who could walk into a room full of strangers and somehow make everyone feel like she'd known them forever. She was sarcastic in a funny way, not mean, and she always had this habit of pushing a strand of hair behind her ear when she was nervous. I remember thinking, if I ever lost her, I'd never find someone like her again. Mark, on the other hand, had been my closest friend since college. We met during our freshman year in a statistics class that both of us hated. We bonded over terrible cafeteria food and shared misery during finals week. He was loud where I was quiet, spontaneous where I was cautious, and over time, we just balanced each other out. I was the one who kept him from doing anything too reckless, and he was the one who reminded me to live a little. For years, we were inseparable. When I started dating Lena, it felt natural to introduce her to him. I didn't expect them to become close, but they did, and honestly, I was happy about it. It felt like my two worlds had finally blended together. We hung out as a trio all the time, movie nights, hiking trips, even double dates with other friends. They'd joke around, tease me about my terrible cooking, and I'd laugh right along with them. I never thought twice about it. But looking back now, I can see the tiny cracks forming. Little things I brushed off at the time that now play on repeat in my head. The long glances between them when they thought I wasn't looking, the inside jokes that I didn't quite get, the moments when Lena's phone would light up with Mark's name and she'd smile before locking the screen. I'd ask who it was, and she'd say something casual like, "Oh, he was just asking about weekend plans." It never crossed my mind to question her. I trusted them both completely. If anything, I was proud that my girlfriend and best friend got along so well. That's how blind I was. Things started shifting about a year before the breakup. Lena began acting different, not in an obvious way at first, just subtle. She was distracted all the time, saying work was stressful and she needed space to focus on herself. I told her to take whatever time she needed, thinking it was just burnout. But the distance between us grew. She stopped coming over on Fridays, which had been our tradition. We used to cook together every week, open a bottle of wine, watch old sitcoms, and laugh until midnight. Then suddenly, she was always too tired. Around the same time, Mark started pulling away too. He was my go-to for everything, but suddenly he was always busy. He stopped inviting me out, didn't reply to messages for hours, sometimes days. I remember one night when I texted him asking if he wanted to grab a drink after work. He said he had a family dinner, but later that evening, while I was out for a walk, I saw a car parked outside Lena's apartment that looked exactly like his. My chest tightened, but I told myself I was being paranoid. Mark and Lena were friends. That was all. My mind refused to believe otherwise. Then, one Saturday afternoon, Lena texted me saying we needed to talk. The moment I saw those words, I knew. I drove to her apartment, heart pounding, and when she opened the door, I could already tell what was coming. She wouldn't meet my eyes. She sat me down on her couch and told me she didn't feel the same anymore. No big fight, no cheating accusation, just quiet detachment, like she'd already said those words in her head 100 times. I asked if there was someone else. She hesitated for a split second, barely noticeable, but I caught it. Then she said no. And I believed her, at least for a while. The weeks after that were brutal. I tried to distract myself with work, hit the gym, go out with coworkers, anything to keep my mind off her. But every night, I'd end up staring at my phone, half expecting a message that never came. Mark reached out once, said he was sorry things didn't work out, and that if I needed to talk, he was there for me. I remember thinking, at least I still have my best friend. That thought makes me sick now. About 2 months later, everything changed. A mutual friend sent me a screenshot from Mark's private Instagram story. It was a photo of him and Lena sitting together at a small cafe we used to go to all the time. Her hand was on his arm. She was smiling that soft, real smile I hadn't seen in months. The caption said, "Sometimes the right person was right beside you all along." My stomach dropped. I felt heat rush through my body, like every nerve had caught fire. I just stared at that image until it didn't feel real anymore. I wish I could say I screamed, punched a wall, threw something, but I didn't. I just sat there, numb, as the realization hit me over and over. It wasn't that they were together now. It was that they had probably been together for a long time. And suddenly, every weird moment, every excuse, every late night made sense. The nights Lena was working late. The weekends Mark was helping his cousin move. The double meanings behind their glances when they thought I wasn't watching. It all lined up too perfectly. And the worst part? Some of our mutual friends already knew, or at least suspected. But no one said a word because they thought I already knew. That cut deeper than I expected. I realized I hadn't just lost a girlfriend and a best friend. I'd lost the entire foundation of trust I'd built around me. I didn't confront them right away. I wanted to, but something stopped me. Maybe pride. Maybe shock. Or maybe it was the need to understand how two people I'd trusted with everything could betray me like that and still smile to my face. So I stayed quiet and started paying attention. Watching, listening, piecing together timelines. I found messages, dates, little coincidences that weren't coincidences at all. I learned they had been seeing each other secretly for months before Lena and I even broke up. And to make things worse, Mark had been coming to me for relationship advice, about her. He'd ask me things like, "What do you think Lena likes most in a guy?" And I'd answer, thinking he was helping me surprise her. I didn't know he was using my words to get closer to her. That realization broke something inside me. The hurt didn't fade, it hardened into something else. I wasn't going to trash them online or show up yelling at their door. That's not me. But I knew I couldn't just walk away, either. They had lied to me, used me, made me feel like a fool. And maybe I couldn't make them feel my pain exactly, but I could make sure they'd never forget what they did. So I decided to wait, to be patient, and to come up with a plan. Something that would make both of them finally understand what it means to betray the wrong person. After I found out about Lena and Mark, I didn't confront them right away. I think a part of me still hoped there was some kind of explanation, even though deep down I knew there wasn't. I replayed every moment in my head, every conversation, every time one of them had told me, "You can trust me." It was like reliving years of my life through a cracked mirror, every reflection distorted and wrong. I didn't want to just call them out. I wanted to understand how it had happened, how two people who swore they loved me, one as a girlfriend and one as a brother, could look me in the eye and still lie. I started small. Watching from a distance. I stayed in our friend group chats, didn't act bitter, didn't make a scene. I knew they'd show themselves eventually. They always do. Sure enough, after a few weeks, Mark started bringing Lena around to group events again. The first time I saw them together was at a friend's birthday dinner. They didn't hold hands, but the tension between them was obvious. That invisible pull you can just feel between two people. She laughed at every stupid joke he made, and he couldn't stop glancing at her like she was some rare prize he'd won. I sat across the table, smiling, acting fine. Inside, my stomach was in knots, but I played it cool. I could tell they were uncomfortable around me, which made me weirdly satisfied. Every time I looked at them, I could see guilt flicker in their eyes. That's when I realized something important. They didn't expect me to handle it this way. They thought I'd lash out, block them, maybe disappear quietly. But I didn't. And that made them nervous. So I used that. I started posting small things online, nothing direct, just enough to keep them guessing. A story with an old photo of Lena and me at the same cafe they went to, a quote about betrayal, subtle stuff. I wanted them to wonder how much I knew. Within days, Mark texted me out of nowhere. He said he wanted to clear the air. I agreed to meet, more out of curiosity than anything. When we met up, he looked nervous, like a kid caught stealing. He kept saying things like, "I didn't mean for this to happen," and, "You have to believe me." I just let him talk. He said they'd only started dating after the breakup, which was complete bullshit, but I pretended to believe him. I nodded, told him I understood, that I just wanted everyone to be happy. The relief on his face was almost funny. He thought I was forgiving him. That meeting told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't sorry. He was scared of being the bad guy, scared that people would find out he'd been sneaking around with his best friend's girlfriend. Lena didn't reach out for a while, but when she finally did, it was a text saying she hoped we could be friends again someday. That one made me laugh out loud. Friends. As if friendship was still something I could even feel toward her. But I didn't block her either. I kept every message, every breadcrumb. I had no real plan yet, but I knew one thing: patience would be my weapon. A few weeks later, I got invited to a party that a bunch of our old college friends were hosting. I knew Mark and Lena would be there. I almost didn't go, but something in me wanted to see them together in public, wanted to know what that would feel like. When I showed up, I could tell they hadn't expected me. The whole room went a little quiet when I walked in. They were standing by the drinks table, close but not touching. I gave them both a nod, smiled, and grabbed a beer. That seemed to throw them off balance. For most of the night, I kept my distance, chatting with other people, laughing, pretending I was over it. But I was watching. I noticed the way Lena would sneak glances at me, how Mark avoided eye contact. When the night wound down, a few of us stayed behind to help clean up. Mark came over again, acting like everything was fine, trying to talk about sports and work. Then he said something that stuck with me: "I'm just glad we can all still hang out like adults, you know." That sentence burned in my mind for days. Like he was patting himself on the back for betraying me in a mature way. That's when I realized being quiet wasn't enough. I didn't want revenge in the dramatic, movie sense. I didn't want to destroy their lives. But I wanted them to feel the slow, creeping discomfort of knowing they'd never escape what they did. I wanted them to live in that tension, to always wonder if people were talking about them behind their backs, if I had told anyone the truth. So I started talking, subtly. Not lies, just facts, carefully placed in the right ears. When a friend asked how I was doing, I'd say something like, "You know, it still stings that they were already seeing each other before Lena and I broke up." I'd drop details, timelines, coincidences. That night I saw Mark's car outside her place. Not in anger, just matter of fact. The story spread on its own. I didn't have to do much. People started connecting dots. It's amazing how fast rumors move when the truth is close enough to them. Within a month, the shift was obvious. Friends who used to invite all three of us started inviting just me, or just them, but never together. I heard that Mark's coworkers found out too, and apparently, he'd gotten into an argument with one of them after someone called him "Mr. Steal Your Girl." As for Lena, she started posting less online. Gone were the cute couple photos and captions about love finding a way. It was like she was retreating. And still, I said nothing publicly. I just watched as their little fairy tale started to crack. But what I didn't expect was how much of my own anger still stayed with me. I thought seeing them struggle would make me feel better, but it didn't. It just made me feel hollow. I realized that even if I ruined their reputation, it wouldn't give me back what I lost: trust, peace, that sense of security I'd had before all this. So I decided to take it one step further, not to destroy them, but to confront them in a way they couldn't ignore. I waited until Lena texted me again. She asked if we could talk, said she felt bad about how things ended. I told her to meet me at the same cafe where I first saw the photo of her and Mark. She agreed. I got there early, sat at a corner table, and watched her walk in. She looked nervous, maybe guilty. When she sat down, I smiled and asked how she and Mark were doing. That question alone seemed to knock the air out of her. She said they were taking a break. That caught me off guard. Apparently, they'd been fighting a lot lately, mostly about me. Mark thought she still had feelings for me, and she accused him of using her to prove something. The irony almost made me laugh. I listened as she talked, nodding slowly, saying little. When she finished, I looked her in the eye and said, "You know, I used to wonder how you could do this to me. But now I think I understand. You both deserve each other." She didn't say anything. Just looked down, like she couldn't find words. I stood up, left a few dollars on the table, and walked out. As I stepped outside, I felt something shift in me, not peace exactly, but closure trying to take form. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like the victim. I felt like the one who finally saw the truth clearly. I thought that was the end of it. But I was wrong. Because what happened next changed everything again. After that meeting with Lena, I thought I'd finally closed that chapter of my life. I walked out of that cafe feeling strangely light, like I had finally let go of a weight I'd been carrying for months. I told myself that was it, no more overthinking, no more silent games, no more obsessing about people who had already shown me who they really were. For a while, it worked. I threw myself into work, started going out again, even reconnected with old friends I'd neglected during my relationship. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. But closure is a tricky thing. It comes in waves. Just when you think you found it, something happens that pulls you right back into the storm. Mine came 3 months later, in the most unexpected way possible. One night, I got a message from Mark's sister, Claire. We weren't close, but we knew each other well enough to talk occasionally. Her text simply said, "Hey, can I call you? It's about Mark and Lena." My heart dropped instantly. I told her to call, and when she did, her voice sounded shaky. She said Mark had been a mess lately, drinking too much, skipping work, and that he and Lena had broken up for good. Apparently, things between them had gotten ugly. Lena had been talking to someone else, a guy from her office, and Mark found out. He lost it. They had a huge fight at his apartment, and he ended up breaking a lamp and punching a wall. The neighbors called the cops because of the noise. Hearing all that, I didn't know how to feel. Part of me wanted to laugh at the irony. He stole my girlfriend, and she cheated on him the same way she cheated with him. Karma, right? But another part of me, the part that still remembered late-night talks and all the years of friendship, couldn't help but feel sorry for him. I didn't want to, but I did. Claire said he'd been asking about me lately, saying he regretted everything, that he didn't expect it to turn out this way. I didn't say much on the phone, just told her I hoped he'd get himself together. When I hung up, though, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I thought about all the times I'd told myself I didn't care what happened to them, that I was done. But hearing that he was spiraling hit me differently. I guess part of me had still been holding on to the idea that maybe, someday, he'd understand how badly he hurt me and maybe even apologize. 2 days later, I got my wish. Mark showed up at my apartment. It was late, almost 11 p.m., and I only opened the door because I recognized his car outside. He looked awful. Eyes bloodshot, unshaven, wearing a hoodie that looked like it hadn't been washed in weeks. The second I saw him, all the anger I thought I'd buried came rushing back, but before I could say anything, he said, "I'm sorry." Just like that. No preamble. No excuses. He said he was sorry for everything, for lying, for betraying me, for choosing Lena over our friendship. He said he thought he was in love, that she made him feel like he was finally enough, and that he didn't realize what he was losing until it was gone. I just stood there, arms crossed, letting him talk. He started crying halfway through, real tears, and for a second I didn't know what to do. I wanted to slam the door in his face, but I couldn't. So I let him inside. We sat on the couch in silence for a few minutes before I finally asked him why he was really there. He said he didn't expect forgiveness, he just wanted me to know he regretted everything. He told me Lena had left him, that she'd been talking to another guy for months, that she told him she never really loved him, the way she loved me. That last part hit me hard. I didn't want to believe it, but it made sense. Lena had always needed validation. When she was with me, she needed Mark's attention. When she got with Mark, she needed someone else's. It wasn't about love, it was about power. I think Mark finally realized that too, but too late. He stayed for an hour, talked about how he couldn't sleep, how he'd lost friends, how everyone at work treated him differently after finding out. I listened, said very little. When he finally left, he looked like a broken version of the guy I used to know. After he walked out, I sat there staring at the empty beer bottle he'd left on my coffee table, wondering what I was supposed to feel. Relief? Satisfaction? Pity? Maybe all three. I didn't tell anyone he came over. I didn't want to fuel the gossip anymore. But that night, I realized something I hadn't before. Revenge, closure, karma, it all sounds satisfying in theory, but in reality, it just leaves you with a mess of emotions that don't fit neatly into words. I thought I'd feel vindicated seeing him like that, but instead, I felt exhausted. It was like watching the final act of a movie you didn't even want to see. I thought that would be the end of it, but of course, it wasn't. 2 weeks later, I ran into Lena. It was at a grocery store of all places, the most mundane setting for the most uncomfortable encounter. I was turning into an aisle, and there she was, standing by the produce section, holding a basket. She froze when she saw me, then smiled weakly. I could tell she didn't know whether to walk away or say something, but before she could decide, I just said, "Hey." That seemed to give her permission to speak. She said she'd been meaning to reach out again, that she'd heard Mark had talked to me. I told her I knew, and she nodded like that was some kind of relief. Then she said something that floored me. She said she missed me. I just stared at her. Missed me? After everything? She said she'd made a mistake, that what she thought she wanted wasn't what she needed, and that she realized too late that I was the one who actually cared. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so predictably pathetic. I told her I didn't hate her, but I could never trust her again. She looked like she wanted to cry, but she didn't. Instead, she just said she was sorry and walked away. I thought that would be the end of our story, but as I watched her leave, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still coming. Something bigger. I'd had my closure, Mark had his breakdown, Lena had her regret, but none of it felt final. There was still this unease in me, like a chapter that hadn't quite closed yet. I didn't know what it was then, but I would soon. Because a few weeks later, everything I thought I knew about their betrayal would be turned on its head again. There was one more secret I hadn't discovered yet, one that would change how I saw everything that had happened, and everyone involved. I didn't think there was anything left to learn. After everything that happened, I figured I'd already seen the worst of it. Mark's breakdown, Lena's regret, the wreckage of what used to be my trust, it all felt like the final chapter in a story that had dragged on far too long. I was ready to move on. I'd started dating casually again, nothing serious, just small steps toward feeling normal. I was finally sleeping better, working better, and even starting to enjoy things I used to love. But one night, something happened that cracked open the entire story again, something that made me question whether I'd ever really known the truth at all. It started with a message on Facebook from someone I didn't recognize. The name was Ryan Morales. The profile picture showed a guy around my age, maybe early 30s, dark hair, professional looking, and the message read, "Hey, I know this is random, but we need to talk. It's about Lena." My first thought was that it was spam, but curiosity got the better of me. I replied asking who he was. He said he worked with Lena, that he'd been dating her for the last few months. My stomach dropped. Apparently, Lena had told him about me, about Mark, about everything, or at least, her version of it. But he said something felt off. He said she told him her exes were toxic and emotionally manipulative, that she'd been a victim of back-to-back unhealthy relationships. He said he didn't believe her at first, but then she started showing signs that reminded him of a situation he'd been in before. Manipulation, lying, guilt-tripping. He said he found my profile because he wanted to hear my side. At first, I didn't respond. I didn't want to get dragged into her chaos again. But the next day, he messaged again and said something that changed my mind. "She told me you hit her." My blood ran cold. I stared at that message for a long time, my hands shaking. She told him I hit her. I felt anger rise in my chest, a different kind of anger than before, hot, shaking, almost nauseating. I told him that was a lie, that I never laid a hand on her, not once. He said he believed me because she'd made similar claims about another ex before, then changed her story later when she was caught cheating. That's when I realized the full picture. Lena wasn't just selfish or unfaithful. She was a manipulator. She'd rewritten the story of what happened to make herself look like the victim every time. I told Ryan everything, the timeline, the lies, how she and Mark had been sneaking around behind my back for months. He thanked me for being honest and said it all made sense now. Then he told me he was ending things with her. A few days later, Lena texted me. "You talked to Ryan?" That was all it said. I didn't answer. I didn't owe her anything. A few hours later, she sent another, "You don't know what you've done." That one made me laugh bitterly. What I'd done. What she had done was create a trail of destruction behind her and play the victim every single time. I blocked her number after that. I thought that was finally the end, but I was wrong. A week later, I got a call from an unknown number. When I answered, it was Claire again, Mark's sister. Her voice was trembling. She said Mark had been in the hospital. He'd gotten into an accident. He'd been drinking, apparently, and drove his car into a guardrail. He survived, but he'd broken his arm and had a concussion. I went to see him, not because I forgave him, but because I needed to see for myself what had become of him. When I walked into that hospital room, I barely recognized him. He looked hollow, like someone who'd been emptied out from the inside. He smiled weakly when he saw me and said, "Guess karma finally caught up." We talked for a while. He told me that after Lena left him, he tried to get his life together, but everything reminded him of what he'd done. He said he'd started drinking more to forget, but it only made things worse. Then he told me something that froze me completely. He said Lena had come to see him a few weeks before the accident. She told him she was pregnant. My heart dropped. Pregnant? He said she told him it was his, but that she wasn't sure. She'd been seeing that coworker, Ryan, at the same time. Mark said he begged her to take a paternity test, but she refused. She told him she didn't want anything to do with either of them and that she was done with all the drama. Then she left. That was the last time he saw her. I sat there in silence, trying to process everything. A part of me didn't even know if I believed her, but given what Ryan had told me, it sounded exactly like something she'd do, pull everyone in, pit them against each other, and walk away when it all burned down. I didn't say much to Mark after that. What could I say? He was paying for his choices in ways I couldn't even imagine. When I left the hospital, I felt this strange mix of emotions, pity, anger, disgust, relief, and underneath it all, a kind of gratitude that I wasn't part of that mess anymore. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that this story wasn't over yet. A few days later, I got another message, this time from an unknown number. It was a picture of an ultrasound. The message said, "You deserve to know." No name, no context. Just that image and those 5 words. My hands went cold. I tried to convince myself it wasn't what I thought it was. That it couldn't be. But deep down, I knew exactly who it was from. Lena. And somehow, despite everything, despite the lies and the betrayal, one question began clawing at the back of my mind: what if it was mine? When I got that message, I sat there staring at my phone, feeling the air get heavy around me. The picture of the ultrasound glowed on the screen like a ghost, mocking me with all the unanswered questions I'd been trying to leave behind. I wanted to delete it, pretend I never saw it, pretend that Lena was just some closed chapter in a story I'd finally escaped. But I couldn't. Something in me, maybe guilt, maybe fear, wouldn't let me ignore it. I didn't respond at first. I didn't even know what to say. But the next day, she called. I didn't want to pick up, but I did. Her voice was soft, trembling a little, the way it used to sound when she was trying to manipulate sympathy. She said, "I didn't know who else to tell." I asked her if it was mine. She hesitated, and that silence was all I needed to know the answer was complicated. She said she didn't know for sure. It could be mine, it could be Mark's, or it could be Ryan's. She said she was scared, alone, and didn't know what to do. For a second, I almost felt bad for her. Almost. But then I remembered everything, the lies, the betrayal, the chaos she'd left behind in every life she touched, and that pity turned to something else. I told her I wasn't going to be part of her games again. I told her to get a test and leave me out of it until she knew the truth. She tried to guilt-trip me, saying I was abandoning her when she needed me most, and I hung up. I blocked her again. But as much as I tried to move on, the thought of that ultrasound haunted me. What if it really was mine? What if there was a child out there that I was turning my back on because of my own bitterness? For weeks, that thought ate at me. I didn't tell anyone, not even my family. I'd been through enough humiliation already, and I didn't want to drag it out into the open again. Then, out of nowhere, I got a call from Ryan. He sounded different this time, steady, calm, like someone who'd made peace with something. He said Lena had reached out to him too. She'd told him the same thing she told me. But he said she'd also told him something new, that she'd decided to move away, to start fresh, in another city. He said he didn't know if she was lying or not, but that she mentioned she didn't plan to keep the baby. Hearing that hit me harder than I expected. Not because of her, but because for the first time, I realized how deep her pattern went. It wasn't about love or loyalty, it was about control. She thrived on the chaos she created, the attention, the drama. Once she couldn't control someone anymore, she'd move on to the next person who would feed her ego. I told Ryan to let her go, to focus on his life, and he agreed. That was the last time I heard from him. About a month later, I ran into Claire again at a coffee shop. She said Mark had moved back in with their parents for a while. He was sober now, trying to rebuild. She said he still talked about me, that he wanted to apologize face to face when he felt ready. I didn't know what to say to that. I wasn't sure if I wanted an apology anymore. Some wounds don't heal with words. They just fade, little by little, until you stop touching them. A few weeks after that, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, just my name on the front in handwriting I recognized immediately. It was from Lena. Inside was a short note and a picture, another ultrasound, but this time with the baby's name written under it, Grace. The note said, "It's not yours. I thought you should know. I'm sorry for everything. Please don't hate me forever." I sat there for a long time, staring at that piece of paper, feeling a strange mix of relief and sadness. Relief that it wasn't my child. Sadness that this was how it had all ended, through lies, pain, and a letter that came too late. I didn't hate her. Not anymore. I realized that hating her meant she still had control over me. And I was done giving her that. That night, I went through my phone and deleted every old message, every photo, every trace of her. I even went through my social media and cleaned house, unfollowed mutual friends who still posted pictures of her or Mark. I needed a clean slate. A few days later, Mark reached out. He asked if we could meet for coffee. Against my better judgment, I agreed. When I saw him, he looked like a different person, thinner, quieter, more reflective. He apologized sincerely, and for the first time, I believed him. He said he'd been seeing a therapist, working through his guilt, trying to forgive himself. He said he didn't expect me to forgive him, but he needed me to know that he was sorry. I told him I appreciated that. I told him I'd already forgiven him, not because he deserved it, but because I needed to move on. We talked for an hour, mostly about random things, work, family, life. When we left, we shook hands, and I realized that this was closure. Not the dramatic kind you see in movies, but the quiet kind that settles in your chest when you finally stop holding on to the past. That night, I went home and sat on my balcony, watching the city lights. For the first time in years, I felt calm. Not happy, exactly, but peaceful. I realized that what I'd been through had taught me something I never would have learned otherwise, that love without respect is just chaos, and trust once broken can't be rebuilt by apologies or promises. It has to be rebuilt within yourself, piece by piece. I realized that the people who betray you don't destroy you, they show you who you really are when everything falls apart. And maybe that's the point. To be broken enough to understand what you truly deserve. To be betrayed enough to learn what loyalty actually means. To lose enough to finally start over. I don't know where Lena is now. Maybe she really did move away and start over with her child. Maybe she found someone new to deceive. I'll never know, and I don't need to. All I know is that I finally stopped asking, why me, and started saying, thank you. Because sometimes, losing the wrong people is the only way to make room for the right ones.